Elysia Rotaru is with us, and I totally butchered her name. Can you say it the way that a really beautiful person would say it? Like not a square person?
Oh, you're so cute. I usually say it Elysia Rotaru, but, like, that's all good.
But you say it on your podcast. I have to be honest with you. I think I listened to your opening podcast thing maybe 30 times this morning because you're like, the opening to your podcast is so cute. You're like, you can do it. You know, you have this like positive like vibe, and then you say your name. And I was like, do you ever have those auditions where you're like, I don't speak medical jargon, but I'm going to go over this line so many times. And then you go in the audition and you butcher it so badly that it's like you made up an entirely different word that makes no sense. It doesn't even sound like it. And you're like, I had this perfectly. That to me was your name. So we've laughed it out now. Now we can move on from the subject. But I was like, I can't even tell you, I was so pumped on saying this name correctly. And then I'm like, how do you say your name before we start? And then I fucked it
You're
up.
so cute. No, it's all good. I think I did the same to you, but because I didn't know if, like, you wanted it pronounced like Torresani, like a specific, like, you want a little hit.
You said it perfectly on your podcast.
That's okay. At least you're not calling me a rotor rooter, which is what was my high school, I think, make fun of name.
Oh my gosh, what assholes.
It's okay. I mean, my first name couldn't rhyme with anything.
Right.
Like, it was like Elysia Obesia, but I wasn't fat, so it didn't work.
So it didn't.
You know what I mean? So it was like,
Yeah. Come to think of it, I didn't have any nicknames with my name because my name was so random. So I feel like maybe that's a good thing is like when you have such
thanks
a
for the
bizarre
unique-
name. Yeah. Like
yeah,
it
yeah.
works.
Like nothing rhymes with your name. So you're like,
No.
cool.
No, but I
Like
was called
Bart.
Casper the Ghost because I was so white and so see-through skin, and I was so embarrassed by it, and I would get so many fake tans that I was so orange, and I was so unattractive.
Let me
and
a photo of that. I need to see that.
Oh, there is this one photo of me going to Coachella one year. And I was, oh my God, I was like fresh 20. I was looking great. The body was there. And I had gotten a spray tan. And we had joked the entire time because my ego was so big on that trip. And I thought I was so sexy and so hot. And I look at it now and I'm like, I was an Oompa Loompa. I was orange.
I love it.
Like I was the Lorax. You know what I mean? Like from Dr. Seuss. Like that was me. But let me tell you, like I was feeling hot. I was feeling great. So everyone would make fun of me. They're like, she has got the tan. The tan has a personality right now. But yeah.
So good though.
Nothing to do with being a mom, but I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
Yes, it has a lot to do with being a mom because now you'll know how to like guide your kids away from that.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm already having so much fun on this podcast. And it's truly like what it was like being on your podcast was you have such an amazing podcast. We're going to get into that on how you ended up there. But so much fun. I was so lucky enough to be a guest. But I think it's so fun because I've now been opening up. I mean, your show is specifically, I would say, well, not specifically, but it's mostly about being a mom and this new journey and like, you know, reviewing things and talking about the things that people don't talk about and, you know, like what to do in these situations. And I feel like my podcast was truly strictly mental health. And now it's kind of just like what I've realized it's following my life. And my life right now is a mom.
Yeah.
And I
100%.
find I learned so much interviewing people, which I'm sure you do too, when you learn so much mom information, or even when I was doing just strictly mental health information. But I love talking to other actors who are moms, who are going through this because it's something that's so relatable to me. It's something that I am struggling with when it comes to self-tapes, when it comes to voiceovers, when it comes to having a podcast. Like, how do you do it all? And so I feel like this is going to be just like such a fun interview. So before we get into you being a mom, you know, I want to know, like, how did you get into being an actor? And was it so scary? Was it fun? Was it something you always wanted to do? You're from Canada. You're from Vancouver, which is my favorite place in the entire world. So how did this all happen?
Thank you. You're so sweet. I honestly didn't think it would ever happen because I wasn't cultivated like that with
Mm,
my upbringing. My parents are Eastern Euro. It was like go be a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer.
mm.
And it was not like the arts was only like a hobby that elevated your status to like
Sure.
make you a more well-rounded person, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
Yeah.
Even though my dad was an artist and like a painter and
Wow.
like in the arts, and my mom was also like always talking about how she loved writing and all this shit. And I'm like, you guys are so fucking weird. But like, okay. And like, and they immigrated to Canada in the 70s, 80s, coming from like communistville. So it was like, you have to, they didn't really know any different. Like they
Right.
were immigrants that like followed the line of what they were taught that made
Sure.
money and were supposed to like have a life. And so for me, it was like, acting wasn't a journey that
Sure.
way. So I played piano competitively though from when I was like my kid's age, like 2.3 to like when I
Wow.
retired at like 18, 19 because I fucking hated it after.
Oh my gosh.
Um
Would you like
yeah, so I was
tour
like
around and play?
not creepily that way. I was a competitive pianist just like up in the lower mainland. So I was in like the Royal Conservatory of Music and like I
Wow.
would practice like fucking 8 hours a day, like I was or whatever. Like it was like homework, school, piano and like maybe an extracurricular
Sure.
activity, that kind of shit. It was like very regimented. But looking back on it, it's like I don't mind that I had all that structure and that
Mm,
like design
mhm.
because it helped probably make me who I am now,
Oh,
right? But
100%. And probably the discipline. Yeah,
the
exactly. But
discipline. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the
yeah. Yeah.
discipline. And I
Yeah.
true, as a new mom, like I am all about my kid having fun and like living their life, but I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
understand there is
Structure.
structure that for me, I thrive on structure. I always
Yeah.
did. And so when I
Yeah.
had my ballet, when I had my dance, I was a competitive dancer. Like I did
Cool.
taekwondo.
You
Like
get it.
those were things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had my piano, but I was not certainly, I think I was playing chopsticks. You know what I mean? Like I was
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, I'm not
I was
competing
playing
like you.
chopsticks as a ballerina. I
Yeah.
fucking hated
Yeah.
ballet. Like, I think I got kicked out because I was like, blah, like, fuck this shit.
But I think that there is something that is so important for a child's development in having
Yeah.
structure. And I notice when I give my daughter, I don't know, like when I give her a puzzle that's like maybe more Montessori based or something, like I see her
Yeah.
thriving way more than she is just sitting in sand. She's like, what do I do here? Like, what's this all about? Like, how do
Yeah,
I
yeah,
begin
yeah.
and
There's
end?
a goal. Yeah. There's
Yeah,
a
there's a
container
beginning
to
and an
play
ending.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not
Yeah.
all kids. I just have noticed that if for me and for my daughter and my husband.
Hmm.
But wow. And so you were just like at 18, like peace out, buy piano, like never touching you again.
Yeah, like so I mean, yeah, like elementary, high school, right? You did like theater. You did
Yeah,
acting and all that shit, right? So I was like, okay, I was always doing those, so those were my
sure.
like outlets, I suppose. And then once I entered university, I was like 16, 17-ish, 18, whatever age gap that was, I don't even know. I didn't have the joy to keep continuing competitively. I
Right.
also suck at math. So when I had to go to those elevated levels to do like in the conservatory, you have to do all these exams for like harmony and like it's all math shit. My
Wow.
brain doesn't work that way. So I like couldn't do it. I like tapped
Wow.
out and I like retired. And I was like independent enough to be like, fuck you, parents, like I'm done with this.
Right.
It kind of like broke their souls, but at the same time, it wasn't
Sorry.
fulfilling mine like to the level that I like couldn't
Right.
jam with anybody. Like I
No.
couldn't go up to a bar and someone would be like, "Hey, drop me a thing in the key of E." I'd be like, "How about I play you a sonata?"
Yeah.
Like, how's that? Like, would you
How does
like
this work for you?
you know,
Like,
yeah, it's
wow.
so that always was devastating to me musically because I couldn't play Bryan Adams, I couldn't, like, jam out pop-wise, but I could, like, fucking rip a piano apart with, like, a concerto for
Right.
fucking 4
Right.
hours,
Right.
and then theater was just always there, it was, like, another art form, and then in university, I was like, "Oh, I'm actually gonna major in theater and do
Wow.
psychology." So I was doing double majors, pieced out of psych because once again, I hit statistics and was like, "Fuck math. I hate
Yeah.
my life." And then I just graduated university and I got a BFA and then started working in a medical office and was like working at bars, working in a medical
Sure.
office
Just
and
doing
then
anything that you could for the
doing
dollar. Yeah.
making money and
Yeah.
paying back my fucking student loans. So, ironically enough, yes, I now use my degree, but like great. Um, and then I got scouted at a medical office by a patient who was like,
What?
"Hey, like, you want to go on a date?" And I'm like, "No, dude, like, I have a partner, but like, thanks." And he's like, "Okay, well, then you should go and meet my brother who's an agent." And I'm like,
What?
"Okay." And it
That
was
is
weird
so
because you're like,
wild.
yeah, you're like, I'm 22, right? I'm also older. Like, I
Right,
had
right, right.
graduated university. I didn't like, unlike, your career, you were kind of like in it from a younger age.
Right,
I was
exactly.
just like beyond. Like, I was like, okay, I guess acting is cool. And I had done background work, so I knew about it.
Sure.
But I'm like, oh, an agent. And I had modeled. So I
Okay.
get that. I get that you need the agent to get the audition
Yeah.
to get the job.
It's a
Like,
whole
I
thing.
know that process,
Right.
but I never thought of it as a career. And then
Hmm.
I met that guy's brother who was my agent for I think 10 years or whatever. Like, I can't even
Wow.
remember. We were together for a really long time and didn't stop booking. And then just
Wow.
kept like, yeah, like I booked like guest stars out of the gate and like then like just kept booking and was like, "Oh, okay." And I guess the theater degree was helping,
Right,
because you're like
right.
cool acting, but it's a different medium.
Did you take acting
So
classes during this time when you were working, or it was all just you?
no, I started just coaching with people. I'm one of those people that like I really like to seek out the people that are like the best at what they do
Yeah.
and like learn from them, or also look at the people that defaulted and learn from what they defaulted with. Like,
Oh,
oh, okay,
interesting.
don't
Yeah.
do that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I sought out a really amazing man named Andrew McElroy in Vancouver who came from the theater himself. So he spoke my base language and
Uh-huh.
then was able to translate and transcend me to film.
Right.
And because of him and like a couple of casting directors in town that I owe like a lot of my stepping stones in my career to, like Sean Cossey, who like helped cast me in Arrow, which was like, I guess my how they say your breakout
Right,
role when
right,
you're like,
right.
bitch, I've been doing this for so long already, but thank you.
Yeah.
Um, it's so those offices were just like kind of my pats on the back, and like Tiffany Mack, like all these like amazing casting offices that just, I don't know, just really kind of
Took a
let me
chance.
take my chances in the
Yeah.
room and supported my weird choices that I didn't think were weird, but were just like not your ordinary audition
Right.
choices.
Right, right.
So that's kind of how it happened. And then I just, yeah, I don't know. And then LA and being down here and being in the US was just always my goal, because
Mm.
this is where I think it's all kind of stemming from. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like
Right.
all the meetings happen down here
Sure,
and
sure. Yeah.
all the shit
Well,
happens, and so
now
it's
I
like
don't know, but
might as well
yes,
be in the
but
hub.
it is, and it's funny to me because, like, for me, I feel like I have worked more in Vancouver than I have in Los Angeles, and I've been doing this
You
my whole
mentioned that.
life.
I've never worked in LA yet. I mean, as an actor on a
Right?
set for voiceover, yes, but
Sure.
like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't been on a sound studio yet to like book a gig yet, or like,
Right. Well, I mean, the
yeah.
sitcoms that I always did, like I did a few sitcom pilots that were single camera that shot, there was one in Vancouver, there was one in New
In
Orleans
Vancouver?
maybe. Yes,
Oh
it was
shit.
two in Vancouver. They were ABC Family at the time, which is now, I guess, what is that?
I don't even know.
No, what if not? Oh God. Oh, I'm like looking at my TV,
Like the
like as if
new
the TV's
network?
on.
I know, like
No, what's a
I don't know.
freeform. So it was what
Oh.
ABC Family was before Freeform.
Oh, truth.
This
I
was a
should
long
know
time
that.
ago.
I've
No,
worked
this
for
was a
them
long
for
time ago. So
voiceover, but I'm
I'm
like,
aging myself. But I mean, I remember that was the first pilot I ever did. Not that I ever did, but one of the first pilots I ever did when I was 18 years old was in Vancouver. And to me, that was like my college
yeah.
experience because I didn't go to a traditional college and I didn't get to go
Oh,
abroad.
cool.
So for me, I was by myself for 6 weeks in a foreign country, like learning. And that's why I feel like I have such
Yeah.
a soft spot for Vancouver, because for me, it's like when people go
Oh,
back to college, they're like, oh my God, I remember when I was in Boston or I was in Wisconsin or
yeah.
wherever it is, like they feel that nostalgia, And
Yeah, yeah,
then
yeah,
I
yeah.
felt an uber nostalgia because I lived there for, on and off 2 years doing Caprica. And that was between the ages of 20 to 23. I'd go
Oh
back
God,
and
I have
forth.
goosebumps.
I
That's
know,
amazing.
because it was like they were my formative years, I think,
Yeah.
were there. It was when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder while I was, living in Vancouver and going back and forth from California. I just felt like it was my time of like, wow, I'm not an adolescent anymore. I'm finally becoming an adult. I'm becoming a
Yeah.
woman. And so,
Yeah.
and you know, all the CW shows shot out there. So I did
Yes, that's true.
Lucifer, which I don't remember if that was CW, but I did
Oh, yes.
Lucifer.
Yeah.
I did Batwoman out there. Like, so it's a
Yes.
constant. And then I became super close with people in Vancouver that were not in the business. So I have like a
Yes.
home base there where I went back for a wedding and like, you know, you do these things.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it's so funny to me because I'm like, I live in LA. I should be working here all the time. And really, in
I know.
reality, it was all in Vancouver, you know, which was such a great
It's
place.
so ironic.
But, you know, when you talk about Arrow and how that was the in quote unquote breakout role, right? Like people say,
Yeah.
I think it's because the fandom, on top of it being a very popular show, the fandom
Yeah.
behind sci-fi, behind supernatural, behind the comic book, you know, world is so huge, especially if you're playing a comic book character, which I'm assuming you did because I think that they all are. So, you know, and you know, when you become that character that someone has been a fan of, that's been in a book before, it just escalates times a million.
Oh, I know.
Like I did one episode of Batwoman and it was out of control how many social media followers I got from that and all this stuff. And I'm like, what? Like, I didn't even remember that I did this. Like, and it aired, I remember like the second week of lockdown during COVID. And I was like, this is so bizarre. What is my life? Like, it was just crazy. But I think that that's why it was such a breakthrough, because when people love a character in a book so much and then they see you bring it to life, it makes it so special and so unique and so cool and just awesome. Have you ever gone to any of the Comic-Cons or met any of the fans from Arrow, from the Arrowverse?
I mean, speaking to that, like it was the first time that I actually was able to go to a Comic-Con. Like I've been on, like you said, every CW show that filmed in Vancouver. I was tapped out. Like I think there's actually, I feel like I can't even be on a lot of the shows because they're like, and you're done. Like we all know you from this, and like it's not cool. I'm like, fuck, put a wig on me.
Yeah.
But I got to go to like it's like saddening. But I got to go to my first Comic-Con that I can remember that was like magnanimous was like in Denmark. It was in Copenhagen.
Wow.
And it was insane. And it was so cool. I was just so like, I have goosebumps remembering it because I'm like, this is so dope and like creepy. And I felt like a loser because I'm not a geek like that, like how the fans are, where I felt like I would like be up at the table and being interrogated by them and I have no answers because like, yes, I read some of the old comic books where my character existed and her evolution of, but like, you know, some of the fans for like the fandom world of those shows go deep, like so deep. And I'm like, I can't answer your question. I'm really sorry.
But they also know more about the character and the storyline in the back. I remember the first Comic-Con that I went to, and it was the pilot had just come out of Capricorn. It came out as like kind of a mini series kind of a thing. And it was before the series, and I had never seen Battlestar yet because, long story short, but basically they told me not to go back and watch Battlestar until we finished the pilot because it was a prequel, right? So I had no idea what was going on. And this guy cornered me, and he knew backstory of my character, of the universe, what happens in 100 years forward, 100 years behind. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I even begin? And you feel embarrassed, right? You're like, am I a terrible actor that like I don't know this backstory? You know, but it's like,
100%.
No, like it's okay, you know.
I know.
But they are lifelong fans. And I'm telling you,
it's
the
so
people
lovely.
that listen to this podcast, even if they're not moms, you know, they still follow because of Caprica and because of the fandom of Batwoman and stuff. And I'm telling you, it's the best. It's the best thing that's ever happened in my life was going to those cons. And I'm so happy that you got to experience that. I'm so happy when I hear people that have experienced that because it's unlike any other acting gig you've ever done in your life, you know.
You have to be like able to receive that energy though. I feel like there's a lot of people that can't. It's funny because my husband I did one in England too, in Nottingham, like years ago. And I brought, I was there with my husband and he was like, I can't be in here.
Right.
He's
It's a
an
lot of
actor
energy.
too, but he's like a different type of energy than I
Sure.
am. So I'm like, cool. He's like, I'm just gonna bring you your coffee and then leave.
You
I'm gonna
have
go
to be a
find a golf
people
course.
person. You have to be a
I'm
people
like,
person
okay.
because it's a
Yeah.
lot, it totally is a
A
lot.
lot of energy coming at you all day.
Yeah.
Like,
Was it called Star Fury, the one that you did?
no, the one
Oh,
in England,
yeah.
the one I don't know what it was called. It was a long time ago. It was like back when I was like still on the show kind of thing
Right.
in like 20s. Like my mom brain can't allow space to
No,
remember.
that's okay.
I was like, I have to go back to like, what is it called?
What was it? Let me look at my notes, my
Yeah,
dear diary.
literally.
No, but I just
Siri,
think that it's so cool. But it is wild how the fandom changes so much. I mean, I've had a
Yeah.
lot of people on this podcast and a lot of people that I'm friends with who
Yeah.
are on Vampire Diaries or
Yes. Yeah.
like stuff like that, like those kinds of shows. And
Yeah.
the fandom, I'm
Or the
telling you,
100.
or the 100, or
Oh my
I have
God.
someone that was on Superman versus Lois, right? That's the newest CW show.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was saying to them, like, they will follow you throughout your whole career, no matter what kind of role you're doing. And I mean,
Yeah.
and it was, the proof was in the pudding because they followed me through my mom journey, and I'm like, these are not moms, like, you know what I mean, like.
I have that same thing, but some of the movies I've done have attracted interesting people.
Ooh, okay. So that's a good
So it's
that's
like-
a good segue. Tell me, what is a very interesting movie that you maybe like not regretted that you did, but that you like can laugh
yeah.
about now that have like a interesting fandom, let's say.
Oh God. I mean, I don't regret
Because
it
you do
at
the
all. It
Hallmark
was
films,
actually-
which I'm so jealous of. That's my dream, is to be in a Hallmark
I
movie.
love, and like I loved, you know what's funny about that? I was never booking Hallmark. I don't really know why. I think it was just because I don't know why, but whatever. And then I finally started booking, so that's cool. But I did a movie years ago called Girl House, and it was like a super hype, like sexy hype horror thriller movie.
Okay.
And it was like fucking so much fun to film and crazy. And it was like like low budget indie shit.
Yeah.
Filmed up in Canada, but it was like epic. Like, I mean, tits out, everyone's
Great
like
time.
half naked, getting murdered. It's like my jam.
Dream
I was
movie.
like, great.
Dream movie. Yes.
Totally. And like I always have this thing in my brain. I'm like, okay, could I watch my films? Could I watch like when I work, I'm like, if I say yes to this project, could I watch it alongside my father-in-law?
Yeah.
Who's here right now watching my baby?
Right.
Like, would I feel ashamed or embarrassed or like awkward? And like I always think of those things.
Yeah.
And like that's one of those movies where I'm like, nah. I'm like, I'd love to watch
would be
that movie along
hilarious.
people I love, because
Right.
it's like, like tits out, blood, you're dying. But like I'd love to be like, yeah, that's me, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's a movie that like attracted a lot of interesting folks. So like, and
Shout out to my fans who like tits out and
shout out to
blood
my
all
titty
over.
fans, literally boobies, like no joke. Like every fucking, I have a guy right now, like bless his soul, who's like, "Where's your OnlyFans? Where's your
No.
OnlyFans account? I would follow you so hard on Only."
No,
Like,
you're
every
like,
fucking
okay,
month.
sir.
I'm like, you would be my only subscriber, and I'm like, it's so cute, and I like adore these people, but it's the comments are hilarious. Like even my husband has to pipe in there sometimes to be like, those are my titties. Okay.
No, your daughter comes in and she's like, no, those
Yeah.
are my boobs.
Titty,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Mine.
But it's those projects that we're like, okay, cool. And I love doing shit like that because like I loved, even now, like I'm getting older and like, I don't know if you've ever done work of that nature where you're like, okay, here's my bod, but there's something for me that I really enjoyed, let's just say, like being comfortable enough to expose that element of my being on film or on stage or wherever, because if it tells the story and it's warranted, it's part of it, right? If it's gratuitous shit, that's another thing, and maybe a paycheck to pay off a student loan debt, which like holler,
Yeah. Shout out to that happens. And
I don't
it's
know.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, whatevs. But it's so those I have a lot of people from that
world.
genre
Well,
that I've played in a lot. Follow me on this journey.
Yeah.
of mamahood, where I'm
I'll
like,
tell you,
"Oh,
I have
thanks for
no
the love."
problem with nudity. I have no problem with sexual situations, we'll say, right? Like in film and TV. I'm someone that's so comfortable with my body. But I will say I wanted to be on my terms, and when I do it, and I, here come the Twitter, the Google trolls that are going to start Googling. But like, it's interesting. I did when I was had just done the Caprica pilot, I think. I had a publicist and she was like, oh my gosh, we have to get you in Maxim. They want you in FHM. They wanted all these things. So I was like, great. Let's do it. I was like feeling really hot. I was like 21. I was single. I was like, yeah, like to all my ex-boyfriends, enjoy this, like Hot 100. I was like number 99. Like I barely made the cut.
I love it. Not with your orange tan though, right?
Not with the orange tan. No. White as a ghost, black hair. Like I was giving you like full goth hot mama. And it was amazing, right? Like I absolutely loved it. But I'm not going to say who released the photos, but someone released the other photos that were untouched, okay? And it was like I was sitting really uncomfortably. My stomach was hanging out. They had a fan on my hair, and the hair moved my nipple out of my way so you could see my nipple, okay?
Yeah.
These unreleased photos came out, and they were all over like the gossip rags. And I remember being crushed and being also like, that's the end. I mean, it was like, now I'm like, who gives a shit, right? Like, but at the time, I was so young. I was so impressionable. I was like, this was when all those photos were getting released and getting hacked from people's phones. And like, I have a lot of friends that were like, had that happened to them. And it was that like thing where I felt like so violated. And I was so unbelievably pissed off because I thought I have worked my whole life to make sure that I had this cookie cutter image, that I was really good. Like I never like did drugs. Like I never like was like drunk in public. Like I never did any of that stuff because I'm like, oh, I'm so good. And then some son of a bitch released a photo where a little bit of my nipple shows, so feel free to Google. But I was so upset because I was like, I wouldn't mind showing myself in nudity. I've definitely auditioned for things and tested for things where that would be a situation, but I wanted it to be under my terms. So I feel like that's like kind of the balance, you know what I mean? Where I understand this whole
part of our work.
Yeah, and I understand
and
OnlyFans.
It has to be in a container.
Totally.
Right? Because then it just becomes not part of the work anymore, and it's just there.
100%.
So exploitive.
But I understand people that do OnlyFans. I understand this because you know what? It's like if you can control what you release and how you want it to be seen and stuff, it's like go for it, girl. Like go for it.
I know,
do what you got to do. Like if that's what you want, you know. So that's just my like 2 cents where I'm like, and now I look back and I'm like, I'm so happy that I have these photos of myself from FHM and Maxim because like, wow, what a body. So my hips will never be the same after baby. So like, this is so fun, you know.
True. My rib cage will never look the same.
It'll never look the same, you know. So it's really so exciting. True. Okay, so now let's get into the fact that you're a mom, okay? And you have an amazing, adorable daughter. But I think that this is what's so exciting is how you have not only become a mom and you're still working as an actor and you're still doing your voiceover, but during this process of being a mom, you decided to do a podcast. Why now? What was the reason behind saying, I have already a million things going on and all the stress in the world with a baby, but let me just throw a podcast on.
Have you been talking to my husband? Did my husband text you about just saying that to me? Oh, Ryan. Oh, man. You know what? It was honestly, long story, longish, shortish, but I've been approached to do pods for a really long time. Like really long time, even pre-COVID shit. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't tap into a subject that I gave a shit enough about to like devote time to.
Sure.
I was also traveling like a mofo, like back and forth between countries. As you were saying, I was in between Vancouver and LA and Toronto, like nobody's business. So I'm not going to fucking set up.
You're not going to bring a whole kit with you.
That'd be
everywhere.
annoying.
Yeah.
But I do now. Like I have a full luggage dedicated to my voice booth that I now travel with all the time. But that's, later down the line. And so I just couldn't do it. I needed a subject that was like, like I said, brought me joy and I was passionate about, and that I didn't want to be like, let's talk about homemaking. Like, I don't fucking cook in my house. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, I can talk about DIY drywalling or something. Yeah. But no one cares. So I don't know. And then I guess COVID happened. I was with a manager at the time and he was trying to pitch me out for podcasts, but it wasn't working and like things weren't sticking. And I was like, okay, done with this. And then sure enough, popped out a kid and was getting calls from friends and family about like, hey, what gadgets are you using? Like, I saw you worked with this brand for strollers. Do you actually like them, or was that like a bought deal? And I'm like, no, like I actually like this
Yeah.
stroller. This is why we worked together on social. So I was doing a lot of brand collabs anyway, um, with brands that I aligned with. And
Mm-hmm.
so rather than having, not that I didn't like it, but having like a 1 hour phone call with one person all the time individually,
Mm.
I started kind of getting the bug. And then I was at the airport one day, and this total stranger heard me gabbing to my friend who was just about to pop out a baby
Mm.
for an hour. He was like, I heard everything you said. I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. I'm a loudspeaker and I'm really passionate about like helping people with the right, like
Yeah.
get the right info. And he's like, no, but like the way you spoke and like, A, you were no bullshit. And B, like, I wish I had somebody like that when I had kids growing up, and my kids are now teens and older, but like how cool. He's like, do you have a podcast? Like, is this what you do for a living? And I'm
Right.
like, no, I'm an actor, but cool. And he's like, you should maybe think about that.
Wow.
So this one random guy that ended up being my seat partner on the plane for 2 hours talked at me about like his life and all this. And I was like, oh, that's kind of nice to hear that from a total stranger who's
Stranger.
like 50. Yeah, he's like 50 something years old and a dude and in like the financial business,
Right.
like totally displaced from what we are,
Right. Right.
AKA moms, but still a parent. So I was like, okay, cool. And then it just kind of happened. I was like, all right. So like, May, June of this year, I was like, let's just throw it down. And I gathered a small but mighty talented team and started to make it. But I honestly, babe, did it with the intent to like maybe just put up 12 episodes of just like,
Sure.
hey, like let's just do this and shoot the shit and then put
Yeah.
a pin in it. And now we're kind of almost have a full season,
Wow. No, I
like
think
getting there.
it's
So
so
it's
cool
weird, but
because
like,
yeah,
I don't know.
and I think it's so funny that you're saying that, you were the person that's always the go-to that people call, because I find that that's what I have become, where it's
Yeah.
so funny because I kept my pregnancy a secret until I think I announced it at like 7.5 months or 8 months, but only
How
a
did you do
few.
that?
Yeah, it was very, 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 very hard, let me tell you. And only a handful of people knew that I was pregnant. And I just wore,
Yeah.
and I was, one of
Big
the things
clothes?
too was I did not show until I was like 8 months. I remember I did my People magazine shoot
Oh,
for the pregnancy and for the
yeah.
announcement, and the photographer was like, okay, so this shot is going to be so beautiful, but like you don't look pregnant, so we're gonna have to like push you out a little bit. So I just stick my stomach out more and like arch my back a little bit,
Yeah.
because I was someone that
So
did not show.
funny.
And then one day I like magically like lady like became huge in my belly, and it was like huge.
Yeah.
But at that time I wasn't showing enough, so I was able to luckily hide it. But
Oh,
now,
wow.
but I had collected so much information, and I had interviewed
Yeah.
so many people in which I would say, hey, like, no one knows that I'm pregnant, but I need to talk to these specialists and these doctors because I was going through so many
Right.
things. So I have kind of become the go-to mental health postpartum,
Like a point person.
yeah, the point person.
Yeah.
And with my hypnobirthing, which we've talked about before, which
Yes.
you
Oh my God. I want to
experienced,
know
and
about that. Yeah.
certain things
Yeah.
that I had just never heard on other podcasts. There was a few podcasts that I had heard, like little, snippets
Yeah.
here and there, but not enough
Yeah.
in one thing. So that's truly how mine started to become more of mom based, because I was just talking about my experience. And like that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah. Yeah.
the podcast has
Yeah.
always been. It's always been my experience with mental health, with doctors, with specialists, with woo shit, And I'm
The
like,
good
this
shit.
is,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, the good shit. And I'm like, this is the woo that I've been dealing with, and how
Yeah.
to do it. And now I find myself like, I have not a PDF, but like a notes folder with like all the go-to stuff that I literally send out to my friends.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
so many people just
That's
kept asking
so
me,
smart of
and I
you.
kept putting in my
Yeah.
notes. And finally I was like, I cannot keep writing these emails to people. I need to just have
Consolidate.
yeah. And so I did that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Like maybe one day I'll like do a few episodes where I'll just give all that information that was like very specific. But you're right. People do ask, did you just use this stroller, because it was good? I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
the Duna saved my life. Like, I'm like, let me tell you, like it has saved my
I
life.
loved the Duna. It was gifted to me by one of my good girlfriends.
The
And
best
I
thing that's
was
ever
like,
happened.
she dropped it off and so she's like, here you go. And I'm like, Shay, I don't need a stroller. She's like, no, you need the Duna. And I was like, Ryan, like, do we need another stroller? And it's like, Ryan, why don't they make the Doona for bigger babies?
Why don't they make the
Like,
Doona for bigger babies?
it's,
Truly, but the other
it was
second thing
so
that I
good.
worked with, and they were amazing, like to work with, and then I use the product, and so like I preach it too, is the Silver Cross jet stroller. It's amazing. It goes down to 16 pounds because I can't carry a lot, and it like 16 pounds, and it goes in the overhead bin.
Like,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's like the best alternative to a Doona.
We found ours from Bugaboo because I had their stroller.
Right.
And then they came out with the I think it's called the Butterfly.
Yes, the little
But
one.
you had yes, and so that's the one we use because I mean, that's the brand we really love, but I haven't heard of that one. I'm always into like knowing what the other ones are because I'm like,
no, Silver Cross is very luxe. It is like a Ferrari. It makes curves and turns very fast, very sharp. Like I am not sponsored by them by any means, but but it was one of those things, right? Where it's like when you find something that you love. Yeah. And it's funny, I went to a showroom recently with a friend who's having a baby and expecting. And I was like, they were like, oh, you need this, you need this. And I whispered to her, I'm like, this is why I'm here with you. You don't need this. You don't need that.
No.
This is a waste of space. This thing doesn't work.
Yes.
Like, and honestly, like, I speak that way with all of my friends in my mom group because we have this music class we do once a week and we've all become super tight from it. And it's like, I wish that I had that when I was buying stuff because the amount of money I wasted on stuff, it's like, that's why I love like.
But it's kind of fun. It's fun wasting money sometimes, don't you think?
Oh,
like,
I mean, it's trial and error, but I'm a hoarder and I don't know how to throw things away or give things away. So I haven't been able, so they're just like.
Bless.
You know, her diapers that are still like 0 to 3 months are still like in the drawer because I'm like, I'm not getting rid of them. She's still a newborn, like as far as I'm concerned, like absolutely not. You know,
so cute. Keep one for when she's older.
Like, keep it for. Yeah, exactly. I like that. Here you go, mom. But I think it's so great that you're doing that. Have you felt like what is something that you have found since starting a podcast? Like, has there been someone that reached out to you or that you've learned that's blown your mind and you're like, wow, I never would have known this if I didn't have a podcast? Because I feel like you're so much more accessible from an audience standpoint and from a guest point of view.
I haven't had yet anyone reach out to me on that level, which would be so dreamy if people would be like, hey, I want to come on and talk about this. But I kind of like do a lot of R&D because my podcast is like, it's funny because I just actually talked to Renee, who has the Mom Room podcast.
Okay, I don't know that.
Know if you know that podcast. She's dope. I think she has like the #1 mom podcast.
Oh my gosh, amazing!
She's been doing this for a long time too, and we just had a conversation last week, and it's funny because I didn't start it with the intent of being like a mom pod, kind of like how you were talking about yours being like you're starting at this angle, and then now it's following your life, and you kind of follow that whole thing with a podcast. Unless you're very directed of like, you talk about what you know, kind of like writers, you write what you know.
Yes.
So for me,
it's
I
evolution.
Hate writing.
Yeah. It's an evolution
I'm
of
like
you.
podcasting. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm just going to podcast what I know and what I don't know. So for me, it's been a journey of like, what can I selfishly also learn and get tidbits of advice on as my kid is growing? So that's what's been intriguing. And like some of this stuff, I mean, I just actually talked to a neuroscientist the other week. And it was really enlightening because I got her book and I was reading it and I couldn't finish it because it's so overwhelming. And it was just talking about nurturing. Like, it's all about this movement that has been around, but not so forward in the public sector. And now more so because of social media. And everyone makes fun of it too, because I love making fun of it also, where it's like, you got to nurture. It's all about love. But then you gotta, like there's all these, I'll send you this one thing on Instagram.
Get off the fucking table.
Yeah, it's like, it was so funny. This one account, I have to find this guy's account, but he was making fun of the whole like nurturing aspect where he was like talking to his kid about like, okay, honey, we got to put your shoes on right now because if you don't, daddy's going to blow a fucking gasket and then he's going to blow it. And then it's not really, and then he like took it to that dark angle. Yeah. But then the trolls came out and they're like, that's actually verbal abuse. And like, you shouldn't be, it's like just preempting your kid to know that there's and I'm like, oh my God, it's a comedy account. But like,
yeah, right.
Whatever.
Right.
So I think so far on this journey, like just touching about that subject matter of just like the neurology aspect of a little being, like
Mm.
it's science and it's stuff that a lot of people, and like let's just call ourselves the layman, because I
Yeah.
don't have a
Yeah.
PhD in
100%. Me
neuroscience.
too.
Like we don't really take those classes from doulas or midwives about brain development
Mm.
for a kid, and about this, and about also nurturing yourself as a parent or a new mom or a caregiver. And talking to her was really lovely, and her book was actually so nice, because it's just like, yo, like this is how I think the perspective of nurturing a kid could look like,
Mm.
and it still works, as
Right.
opposed to like what we've been taught for decades,
Right.
right? With the Industrial Revolution coming up, and I was like, oh shit, this is so fascinating. And also culturally, like then we talk about different cultures and bringing your kid up from that standpoint. And one of the biggest ones was like co-sleeping and like all of these things, and
Right.
like breastfeeding, which you do
Well,
like
you do you,
what
but I was
works
going to
for
actually
you.
ask you because
Like,
since you brought it up, and this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and I don't talk about it a lot, but I talk about it in real life a lot, is,
yeah,
I still breastfeed lady. She's,
great.
17 months old,
Yeah,
probably going to do it until she's done, and it's so
yeah,
funny
yeah,
because a lot of moms that I know do still breastfeed their babies, even if they're a little bit older. They just do it.
yeah,
And it's funny
yeah.
because there's judgment from an older generation and there's judgment from a younger generation. There's judgment from friends of mine who don't have kids. Like one of my best
Yeah,
friends,
yeah.
like I will call him out, but he was said to me one day, he's like, "When is that going to stop?" He's like, "Because enough is
Oh,
enough.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
she's not a baby anymore." And I was like, "But I'll stop when she wants to stop." He's like, "I know, but like she's getting too big." And I'm like, but she wants it. So like,
Yeah.
what would you like me to
And
do?
there's
You know,
nothing bad about it.
and
Yeah.
there's nothing bad about it. So as someone, as a mom who looks to you, who has a baby who's, a little bit older than Lady,
Yeah.
do you find yourself still dealing with that judgment? Like when you're out in public and like, she like grabs a
We
boob
you
or,
It's funny because she's been like really awesome with like the whole titty action, where like she's 2.3 going on 2.4 this month, right? She kind of had like this inherent agreement with me, like when she got a little bit older, I kind of said to her, I'm like, hey babe, like, when she started eating food, I'm like, titty time is at home time,
yeah,
and she was like,
interesting.
okay. And she kind of clocked into it.
Wow.
There are, of course, those moments where we were traveling on an airplane and I don't give a fuck. I'm going to whip out my tits and
Yeah.
put that kid to bed. And if she's going to have a hissy fit, I'm going to shove that tit in her face so she shuts up so no one's going to get pissed off.
Yeah.
And guess what? It works every time.
Yeah.
Magic. Like,
It is
awesome.
magic. My
Bye.
boobs are
And
magic.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like we are magic. And like all the fucking trolls on the airplane don't have to be a troll. So for
Yeah.
me, I was like, I don't really give a shit. And like, yes, she's older now, but we play and she's cute. Like she'll tackle me to the ground or whatever, and she'll be like, titty, titty, and like try to rip off my shirt, and like she'll do one of these and like try to get in my
Yeah.
bra with like her little fucking creepy baby hand, and it's so cute. And I'm like, your little hand can't whip out my big tit. Just hold on a sec. Like it's like hilarious because she's like,
I
so
got it, mom.
I got it. Yeah. And it's like the tiny little fucking chubby hands, and it's so cute. But like you know what? Like even Ryan, like even Ryan's like, you do you, but sometimes I think our biggest hurdle right now is that she's going through another growth spurt, right? Her
Mm.
molars are kind of trying to pop through, and everyone needs a little bit of love and hug when like all these changes are happening. But that kind of segues back to what I said earlier about like understanding their development with like neurology, just knowing that like you are what regulates them, and you and your nervous system keeping regulated helps them stay
Right.
regulated. So if your kid needs to jump on your tit to like regulate, whip out that tit
Whip
and
it
like
out.
fuck them
Like,
haters. Yeah, like who cares? Because would you rather have your kid distressed or not? Like I don't know, but that's just how I feel.
that's how
And
I
also
am.
I know that it's kind of cute and fun. Like she wants to play, cool, but then we have boundaries. Like now she's conceptualizing, oh, okay, so it's bedtime. We talk about like she wouldn't go to bed the other night. And I'm like, okay. She's like, titty, titty. And I'm like, okay, we'll have a little bit and then we have to go to sleep because mom's tired too. And she's like, okay. And she gets it. I'm like,
Right.
okay. And she can stay on there forever, as we all know.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, babe, like we have to go to sleep now so we can wake up. And she'll fuss and have her resistance,
Sure.
but then figure it out.
But she
But
figures it out.
I think what bothers me is like intuitively, and this is person to person, is like,
Yeah.
how does it make you feel as a parent, like withholding your tit?
Oh,
Like if
I
you
can't do
know
it.
that your kid,
I can't do
like
it.
if you know that they're there and your kid knows that they're there and you are readily and available
Right.
there and you say no, like and I'm not saying this to sound like a fucking bitch, but I'm just like, how do you feel about saying no to your
And
kid?
some people
Like, does
can
it
do
feel
it.
good for you? Are
Yeah,
you
like
like okay with that? I don't
yeah.
know.
And for some
I
people,
feel
they are
weird.
okay with that. You know what I mean? And some people,
Totally.
like, they're like,
Totally.
I'm someone that's so used to spoiling, and like, that's my love language that I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't say no ever. And so for
Yeah.
me, like, I'll be like,
Wait. Give me your tit. Give me your tit.
yeah, here you go. Here you go. Here
Yeah,
you
give me
go.
your tit.
But it's interesting. Like I'll like take a bath like once a month of like finally being like, okay, I need a moment, you know. And I'm in there and I'm editing my videos like while I'm in the bath.
Yeah.
It's so unrelaxing. Like
Don't drop your phone. Yeah.
I've dropped my phone so many times in there, and I'm just like, that's okay. Like I don't care. I gotta get this video done. Like I gotta upload
Yeah.
this. Like I gotta like I get everything done in the bath because it's really efficient and to the point,
So
and I'm like
good.
relaxed, and it's the only time I have alone. But
That's awesome.
it's awesome and it's great. But I will hear lady crying and I'm like, oh my God, is she okay? And my husband will be like, she's fine. Like she's literally like mad because like I took her sock off and she wants the sock back on, you know?
Yeah.
But for me,
Yeah.
it's like my boobs hurt and I'm like, no, she needs me. She needs me. She needs a boob. Like, let me
Yeah,
give her a
yeah,
boob. So and let me tell you, if you live in the Los Angeles area, in the Palm Springs area, in the New York area, you have seen my boobs, like without a doubt. Like they are whipped out at Home
100%.
Goods, they are whipped out at TJ Maxx, Marshalls,
Yeah.
like Costco,
Yeah. Yeah.
Saks, Neiman Marcus, you name it, they have been out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, it's and I don't. For me, it's like my daughter first. I don't really give a shit what other people say, but I'm
Yeah.
always so self-conscious myself, being like, I don't care because I'm going to do what she needs, but it feels like so much judgment from people when I'm like, it's not your baby and it's not your boob. So what is it to you? You know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at.
I I think it's that stigma though that's been, I mean, you've got to talk to this doctor. She was awesome. Her name is Dr. Greer Kirschenbaum. But she was just talking about it because it's like it's that stigma that gets, that gets put on through us through the times of like,
Yeah.
that's too old. And like my kid is over 3 feet tall and she's only 2. So
Right.
she kind of looks like she's 3.
Right.
So already like people are like, your kid is like a little bit not with the program because they already like put her in this other
Sure.
age bracket just because she's tall. But you're like, no, dude, like calm down and also go fuck yourself. Like,
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
need you labeling my child. And also, it's my child. So we do like we do have the boundaries, and she's been like, I'm sure as your baby gets older and lady like
Yeah.
figures out like, oh, maybe titty time is like a special time.
Right.
It becomes like this thing. Who knows, like how you want to do it in your home, but like for us, it's still there. And like, I mean, just last night, like she didn't want the tit.
Yeah.
Like she was just like, all right. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, not gonna lie, I'm like, I'm not mad about that because like now I can just like go to bed and like you're cool.
Sure.
So you're not a boob barnacle right now for an hour, like not falling asleep. But it's also, it's just
I love
and some
that, a
people-
boob barnacle.
a boob barnacle,
Because that's
I used to
exactly
call
what
her
I feel like.
Yeah, and like I used to call her a TVB. We named her the Titty Vampire Bat, like when she was a baby, because she'd be like, ah. But and so I don't know. I think it's just all, and it varies like tit to tit. Like maybe your boobs hurt, maybe your kid accidentally bites your nipples off too many times, and then you have to not have them feed
Yeah.
or whatever.
Right.
And it's not even a feed anymore, right? It's like
No, it's
like
comfort.
It's like a comfort.
And it's
a
funny
nourish
because
thing,
I
like,
talked to someone
so-
and I forgot who I was talking to, and it was like so sweet because I told them that she does her hands like this for those who are not watching. It's like basically just like squeezing a boob basically, and we call it chi chi, and she goes chi 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 chi, and they're like it's not even that she wants the boob. It's like she's communicating like she needs her mama. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
that's literally
she
what it
needs
is.
her
Yeah.
emotional support for a second if she's having a
Yeah, yeah,
moment.
yeah.
And it's like, you
100
know what? I get it.
100%.
Like you're having a moment, girl. I'm having a moment. Sometimes like I put her on my boob like because I'm like, oh, I feel like she needs this and like I feel like I need it more. You know, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 100%. And that's what you're there to regulate each other, I think. And like, I mean, one of my best friends who was on my pod, she's also an actress, and I asked her, I'm like, what's the biggest piece of advice or whatever
yeah.
you can give to people listening? And she's like, a regulated nervous system.
Yeah, I agree.
And she's like, honestly, like if your kid can witness that as like, parent to parent or caregiver to kid, and then also learn to figure out their system and keep it regulated, that's a huge win. And
Oh,
like if
it's
we
the
can do that
win.
with our own bodies, then why not? Like why my whole thing is like, why withhold that? Unless
Yeah.
of course, like I said, there's something physically unavailable to you,
Sure.
or you're working or you're deployed fucking overseas,
Sure.
like that's a
Sure.
different story.
Sure.
Or, there's people that just don't want to. Like I always found it fascinating when people said at 3 months they want to stop
Mm-hmm.
breastfeeding their kid. And I was like, why at that age? And also like, do you have to go somewhere? Like in my brain, I'm like, why? Like, why
Sure.
make that the limit? And some people were like, I just don't want to do it. Like I physically feel like it's weird, or like I'm like, cool, cool,
Or
cool.
like
Like
my
I'm
mom, for
curious,
instance,
you know?
like, yeah, my mom, for instance, she could only breastfeed me for about 6 weeks because A, she could not make enough milk. Like she
Yeah.
literally could not make
Yeah.
milk and she dried up out of nowhere and I was allergic to it. So it was like,
Yeah.
one of those things where it was like, what am I supposed to do? And so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think my mom like sees it, in a very like, when lady does this, like immediately, like she wants
Yeah.
Chi Chi, like my mom's like, give it to her, because it was something that my
Yeah. Yeah.
mom
Yeah. Yeah.
always wanted
Yeah.
to be able to do and couldn't do it. So my mom
Yeah.
like is
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
my mom's the pusher of the boob, like
Yeah. Mom's the
she's
pusher of the titty.
the titty pusher.
The titty pimp. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so interesting. And I always say to, my friends who are expecting babies and are new, I had because I had a lot of friends that didn't breastfeed, period, like at all, never even tried
Yeah.
because they were on
Oh, wow.
medication. A lot of
Oh,
mental
got
health
it. Got it. Got it.
medications, like you can't
Sure.
breastfeed.
Sure.
And it was like, what
Yeah.
is more important for the baby? Is it the breast milk and an unhealthy mom, or a present healthy mom that can be there for her baby and give a formula,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's that struggle and that battle that so many moms deal with.
100%.
And that's what I always say, like for instance, when I was, at that showroom with a friend showing all the baby products and the formula, and she's like, well, I'm going to breastfeed. I don't need this formula thing. I go, look, you have to just go moment to moment because you never know.
You never know.
Your baby may not latch. You may not be able to produce breast milk.
Yeah.
They may be allergic to your breast milk. Or maybe there's a moment where you're like, I just can't do this anymore for my own stability and my own mental health.
Yeah.
So I said,
I've been there.
Yes. And like, I think when it comes to breastfeeding and when it comes to, a baby is like fed is best. And like, whatever is the best for you and your baby. And you have to make that decision.
Yeah.
No one else can make that for you. There is no
Yeah.
timeline. It's whatever you want to do. So I love that. And I think that you and I are so similar and so aligned on how we feel about the baby. So when I look to you, I truly thank you so much for sharing this information with me because
you're so sweet.
it's something that I deal with as like a struggle of like, oh my God, should I be stopping? Even though I don't want to. And like, I know she doesn't. Like, it's nice to see someone who's a little bit further ahead of me that's still like going through this,
The weaning, right? It's like the weaning. When do I wean them off? The wean. And you're like, I don't know, man. I feel like you'll naturally do it. But I'm with you. Like don't get me wrong. Like there are moments in these past few months for sure where I'm just like, I just like don't want her on my tit. Like I'm tired. She's tired. It's not really like putting her to bed anymore.
right?
And she's heavy now. Like she
She's
weighs
a
a
big girl.
lot,
Yeah.
and like we have to recline, right? So it is like it's a dance, and it's a subject that I feel like it gets talked about, but then it gets shat on too.
Oh,
So you're not wrong
constantly.
there, and like
Constantly.
it's and a fed, like you said, a fed baby is the best baby. Like feed the baby. And honestly, like the best resource I had on this journey was my lactation consultant in LA, that I got to meet and work with, and she was so fucking awesome because she talked about all of those things that you don't get told. You don't get told about fucking tongue ties, really, about why your kid isn't latching. Is it your
I had a
nipple?
tongue
Is it a
tie.
tie?
They never knew.
Like you don't. I had one. I still have them. We didn't know. It wasn't a thing back in our time, perhaps. And but like I wonder if and not to sound creepy, but like I wonder if your tie was one of the reasons your
Well, it
mom,
was. And I ended up,
couldn't feed. Like,
yeah, it was. And that's why I had to have it. I had to have it clipped when I was like older. I was like 3 years old or something like crazy. And that was
yeah, but
why.
you're like, if that was caught earlier,
Yeah.
perhaps you could have latched better maybe, or
Oh,
and it would have helped
100%.
her production. You know what I'm saying? So like
100%.
it's new discoveries that I think really help the birthing and the parenting journey now,
Yeah.
but it's also so unavailable to some people
It's so
sometimes still,
unavailable and it's so
It's
expensive.
like,
It's
where do
so
you look?
expensive. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
expensive. It's hard
and
to
it's the
find.
resource that
People were such assholes to me in the hospital afterwards, like the postpartum nurses. There were like 2 that were really sweet. And then there was one that was such an awful bitch to me.
why?
She was
But,
awful.
like,
She
why,
told me I was
like
starving my baby because I wasn't teaching her. I wasn't able to feed her and that I needed to start giving her formula. And this is when there was a formula shortage. And I was like, what am I supposed to be
Great.
doing? Like, it was a disaster. And I was so lucky because finally then there was an amazing lactation consultant at the hospital that
Yeah.
happened to be coming in.
Yeah.
And she was like, you're fine. You're not starving your baby. Your baby is 1 day
Yeah.
old. It's getting a little bit of colostrum. That's all you need. Like, and I was like, worked myself up into a panic,
Yeah. But I wonder if she was an older, like from a different
She
thought
wasn't
I don't know.
older, but she
I
was
don't know.
certainly like a very know-it-all. Like, just she was shoving
Interesting.
lady's face in my boob, and I was like, this is not working. Like, she's uncomfortable, she's screaming, I'm screaming. Like, it was a disaster. But I was so
Also, your energy is like not welcome in this
it was
process.
not the
Bye.
energy welcome. No. And I remember my husband went down to go get the birth certificate and I came back and I had tears running down my face and I was hyperventilating. And he was like, what the fuck just happened to you? And I was like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
But I think that it's, I'm happy that I went through what I went through because now I can be here to share the story.
Yeah.
And I truly am a firm believer in all these experiences. So what
100%.
is next for you? What's next with the podcast? Like what's the next step?
I don't know. I'm genuinely I like you said earlier when we opened, I'm doing a lot of shit, but that's just who I am. I'm like a master of Jack.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades,
I love
master of
that.
Jack. Come on. But I don't know. I just want to keep rolling with it, pun intended, to just see like what comes out. And as long as it still brings me joy, I
Yeah.
want to keep doing it. And I hope that it just remains fun and like informative for people listening in
Yeah.
whatever avenue it goes down. I mean, I'm late to the podcast game. Let's
Sure.
just put it that way in terms of like the pocket, right? I didn't have a baby in 2019
No.
where I would have monetized my podcast by now because the pandemic happened and like I'm a
Yeah.
mom then. This is just my journey, and on that respects, like the pod is the pod, and then with work and like other ventures, like
Absolutely.
and then I hate to say it, like the strike actually, I'm sure maybe some people can relate and are going to shit on me for this, but it was like a good mental break just to be like, okay, let's recalibrate. And like when we come back, where's our focus going to be for our work? And hopefully everyone is like in a good position mentally and physically and spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
Enough to like, to
Absolutely.
allow all of those energies to come back and like
Yeah.
fulfill and flourish. But I got to ask though,
Yeah.
I got to ask, because like,
Yeah.
what's the whole energy that you found with like momhood and acting? Like, did you find that there was a disconnect in that sense for you with the journey of that career point? Or are you like chutzpah, let's go, like I want to be on
I'm
set?
chutzpah, let's
what I
go,
mean?
but lady has to be on set with me. But I also
Right.
have to say, and I talk about it on the podcast, how 10 days
Yeah.
postpartum, I put myself on tape for an audition. I
Yeah,
then
yeah.
checked into the hospital the next day because I had so much postpartum hemorrhaging that continued. And I was in the hospital
man.
for hours and they were trying to figure out. Then I had a DNC a week later. Am I upset about that? Yes. I'm upset that I did it because I was not in a mind frame to do it, but I was so determined not to be a different person than I was pre-baby.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
I pride myself on my work ethic. I pride myself on showing up early. That's just who I am.
Me
I pride
too.
myself in turning in a tape within a
Yeah.
few hours when I have a whole week to do it. It's
Yes.
like it's a
Yes.
perfectionism
Yeah.
that I don't agree with.
You're a workhorse. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm a
you're a
hustler.
mule.
I'm
You're
just
like me. I'm just like
yeah, I
we're both
hustle.
like
Like
get us to work.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
feel so strange that I'm not on a show. I feel so strange that I haven't worked since before COVID. Like I feel like full transparency, like I feel like a
Yeah.
complete failure and I feel like a
But you're
loser
not.
and I feel like I'm
Yeah.
past tense. Like I use past tense all the time of like, oh, I was an actress. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? You are an actress. Like you are like, and I'm like, yeah, but I haven't had a job in so long. And they're like, are you fucking kidding me? Like calm down. Like you've been on billboards. Like you're fine. You know, I'm like,
Yes.
oh, but that's where my mindset is. You know what I mean? It's this. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
actually
yeah.
been very happy that there has been a strike and there has been these things because not only has it been an excuse as to in quote unquote why I haven't worked, it's been a moment for me to kind of step back and be like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I brought someone into this world. She's only this young, this fat, like time. It goes by
Yeah.
fast. I need to enjoy this moment. So I've been doing neurofeedback. I've been really trying to reprogram my brain
Ooh,
to
Yeah.
like just breathe. And I haven't breathed in years. And so finally being able to breathe, it's been a lot of trauma that's been coming up, a lot of PTSD, and a lot of anxiety, but it's been good. So I feel like that's my long-winded answer to your question.
But I get so emo hearing that because if I may, when you came on my pod, you talked about being off your medication, correct?
Yes, still am. Yes.
And you still are, which
Yeah.
like I think is phenom that you're able to process all of this too. But like that's a lot of
a lot.
energy to come up and to bring to the surface during such a formidable time of your postpartum and your baby's youth of like like my one agent that I brought up earlier, he would always say to me, like, the industry will always be there. The business will always be there. A job will always be there. And he's right. And like, I always am so grateful to have heard that from him when I first started. But that's like, I look at you and I'm like, girl, like, you're formidable.
Yeah, but
You're a producer. You're making a pod. You've been
Sure.
doing a pod for how many years? You popped out a kid. But I also understand what you mean. Because there
yeah.
is that like rush and that sensation of like collaborative set life and just creation on that level, which
And
we
I feel
all
like a lot of
like
moms
crave. Right?
don't understand unless you, because it's one thing to go back to a job that's like a job that's there, that's not going anywhere. But I think because acting is a lot like real estate, for instance, right? It's like you have to hustle to create your own career, right? You have to hustle to make your own stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's
Work
like
begets work.
entrepreneurs, right? That's why I love having women entrepreneur moms on here because it's the same thing. It's like your career depends on you. Like it's not on other people. It's literally on you how much you hustle. So I think that that's what's really scary is like when you're like, oh my God, like, am I missing this opportunity? Like if I didn't put myself on tape, if I didn't get this, like if I don't get this job, you know, I emailed this person, they never emailed me back. Like I'm dying to do a Hallmark film. And I'm like, someone get it to me. Like
it's a new moon today. It's a new
moon. So let's do one together, please. Like, because I'm like hustling right now, but it's this scary life of, you know, juggling and being an entrepreneur as a mom too. Like that's a new job, you know what I mean? And like, that's something you have to be present for and you have to make the commitment and you have to show up for your baby. So it's very similar to being an actor, you know? So that's why I love talking to other actors who are moms like you or entrepreneurs or podcasters, because it's like, look, you have to show up and turn your mic on and come up with a subject, find someone to interview, sit there. But it's true, you do. So like, it doesn't seem like a lot of work for some people, but when you're a mom, you have to find the babysitter. You have to find someone. I had someone that just didn't show up the other day that I've been planning to interview for 3 months. They had to approach me. I didn't even approach them. And I like got a sitter. A sitter, like my mom, but she drove in she drove 2 hours in, you know, to make sure she could watch the baby, to be there for that hour. So then she would drive back another 2 hours. And the dude never showed up, never emailed, never nothing. And I was just like, you know what? I didn't. And it was funny because like, I didn't even want to interview this person, but I was like, oh, well, they approached me. Like, it seems like good. But I'm like, you know what? I should have listened to my gut instinct. You know, I never wanted to interview them. So it's like, you know, so it's. I don't know if I'll keep that on the podcast, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of showing up. So I honor you of being a mom, showing up, finding the time.
I was late today.
No, you were 5 minutes late. That was not late. My God. I've had people that are like 30 minutes late that I still like don't even care because guess what? We're moms. And like, that's our most important role. And like, this is second,
Yes, I know. But I'm like you in the sense where I'm like, it's overtime. I'm so late,
No,
right?
you were perfect. You were
I
perfect.
get it.
Well,
You're
while
so
I'm going to
wonderful.
leave you on this, I'm going to ask you my final question that I ask everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I know what the answer is, but I might be surprised.
Okay. Okay.
What is your emotional support?
Oh, fuck. I don't know.
That's okay.
I don't even know what the answer is.
Yeah.
What is my emotional support? Holy shit, woman, why didn't you give me this question earlier? Something that I don't actually do anymore, sadly, and it makes me so sad to say this, and full transparency. I think it's mostly because where we live, not shitting on where we live now, but yes, it's being
Just
in the
isolating.
mountains. Like, yeah, like I grew up skiing and hiking, and that was like my solace, like being in the woods, in Vancouver. And I don't get homesick. I get homesick for like nature, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I think I need to refine that because, funny question, I've been quite emotionally devoid these few months where I'm just like tapped out. So long fucking answer, but I think it would definitely just be like, hiking and being out in nature again and like getting on a ski hill or something like that. I think that's where I always find my grounding.
I love that.
Emotionally.
That's such an amazing answer. And off camera, I will tell you a few places where I recommend you should go in your area that I know of. But please let everyone know, how can they find you? How can they listen to the podcast? How they follow you?
Ooh. Yeah. Okay. So my personal is at Elysia Rotaru on all social channels. Like Instagram's my hub mostly. I don't do X anymore. Bye. But you can find me there across the board. And then the YouTube channel is there the same. And the podcast is at youdidit_the podcast on Instagram. Cool. And you can find it wherever podcasts are available.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.